So we should clarify that the Education Department is notifying the entity that has given Columbia University its accreditation, which basically gives them the power to issue degrees. Basically is the definition for why they are a university. They're notifying here Middle States Commission on Higher Education that they believe that the university is in violation of anti-discrimination laws. That is, of course, tied to anti-Semitism that they say is happening on campus and the protests that we've seen on the war in Gaza here. And this is really a turn in narrative when it comes to the relationship between the administration and Columbia, because there had been signals from President Trump, from Secretary McMahon, that conversations were in the right direction between her and the university's president. And of course, Harvard took a big step with lawsuits against the administration. Now, Columbia has not been doing that. So this certainly suggests that conversations perhaps are not going in the direction that certainly Columbia hopes that they are.
Kayla, you write from a quote here from Linda McMahon that accreditors have an enormous public responsibility as gatekeepers of federal student aid. They determine which institutions are eligible for federal student loans and Pell Grants. So just talk about they're notifying Columbia, but actually, like in practice, is anything changing for the university or its students yet?
So the responsibility is really on the accreditor here to take these findings and assess them and assess Columbia's accreditation going forward here. But this is really a concept or a theme, if you will, that the president has been talking about on the campaign trail. He has long believed that the accreditation system is unfair, and he has talked about alternatives from traditional universities, and a huge part of that is they believe that there is bias on a lot of these private campuses, a lot of these Ivy League campuses, that they believe is not a welcoming place for conservatives, and certainly the ideals that are driving his movement.
I want to go back to something that you mentioned just a moment ago, and that is the kind of status of dialogue or the relationship between Columbia and the Trump administration. So we saw it really deteriorate under the leadership of Manu Shafiq, who was the president of the school for a very short period of time. She was succeeded by Katrina Armstrong, who was president for an even shorter period of time. On an interim basis, she was heading the medical school and moved over to the presidency, stepped down. And now Claire Shipman, who had been heading Columbia's board of trustees, is the interim president, the new interim president. Get us up to speed on sort of how much the two entities are talking, the administration and Columbia, and sort of what the university has done in recent weeks to kind of comport or talk with the administration about a path forward here.
Well, Secretary McMahon has been very public that she has had conversations with the president. She has spoke somewhat admiringly of the current president, but she says these negotiations are ongoing, both with Columbia and Harvard. And we saw Columbia put out a statement where they said that they were not open to some of these demands that the administration has when it comes to, quote, viewpoint discrimination, where they really asked Columbia and Harvard to make these sort of changes to their faculty and their students to sort of represent more viewpoints when it comes to political or ideological beliefs, because, again, they believe that these institutions have a bias, particularly a liberal bias, on campus.
This is obviously a breaking news situation, and you write that Columbia did not yet respond to requests for comments. But how do you think the university is going to respond?
Well, I can't tell you exactly what they will respond until they actually do, but Columbia has been very measured as opposed to Harvard, who has taken now 2 lawsuits against the administration, one on student visas and one to get their federal funding back. So they have been measured up until this point, really trying to strike a deal with the administration through negotiation. So I'm certainly interested to see if they go the route that we've seen Harvard go, or they continue to try to have these negotiations behind closed doors to potentially get their funding back. And of course here also to defend their accreditation as a university.